Hi, I'm Debra Lynne Katz, and you are watching The Other Side of the Curve, sponsored by the International School of Clairvoyance. Today I want to talk about psychic development in stages. And you can think of this in two different ways. One, what happens as one progresses through the different stages of being a beginning clairvoyant or remote viewing student, to intermediate, through advanced, through professional. So the stages that a person would go through their own development. The other way you could think of this is what happens during an actual session from the beginning to the end. So just like there is a difference for someone just starting out compared to where they will be once they've gotten the techniques and, most importantly, practice. And then two, what happens during a session itself, whether it's a clairvoyant reading session where you're going to be tuning into a person and giving them information about themselves, or if this is going to be a remote viewing session where you are using your abilities to describe locations and objects and activities, finding things, helping solve crimes. Just a side note, there's a lot of crossover to both of these, but if you go to my website and look at my different classes, you'll find I teach clairvoyant reading and healing in 3 levels, and then I teach remote viewing in 1 level, but it's a 12-week class. And I guarantee you what happens in the first hour of class is very different than what happens 3 hours later, which is very different than what happens 3 weeks later and 12 weeks later. And starting in January, I'm going to also be offering a class for advanced remote viewers who really need to get some extra practice in, have some help with areas where maybe they have some gray areas they're not doing so well in. How are they presenting their sessions? Are they really doing enough probing? And that's what I want to talk about today is primarily the initial stages of tuning in, and then the stages of probing, and then delivery. And there is so much we could say about all of these, but in a nutshell, the initial tuning in stage, whether you are going with the approaches of clairvoyant reading, which is using symbols to get information about people. Now it's called clairvoyant reading because you're focusing on the visual, but this allows all your abilities to come into play. So your instant knowing, which is claircognizance, telepathy, mind-to-mind communication, or perhaps heart-to-mind communication, definitely empathy, or we'll call it clairsentience, but a lot of people call themselves empaths today who have clairsentient abilities. So we could call this empathy or clairsentience, where you're feeling other people's feelings and body sensations, and this gives you information about them. So during clairvoyant reading and healing, you are using all these different abilities, including mediumship. When it comes to remote viewing, you are also using all of these as well. They just may show up a little differently because you're not going for symbols, you're going for being able to see what's in the physical realm as closely as possible to what appears there, which one might say, well, our perceptions are never exactly the same as what's there. Our perceptions are always going through filters of our anatomy, the limitations, all that comes with the ideas in our mind. We're filtering information through. So even as I am looking outside right now and seeing a tree, I'm having a different experience seeing this tree than if 100 people were standing next to me. We might all agree on some characteristics, that the tree is tall and it's green and that it has a lot of leaves, but our experiences, our memories that we conjure up about it, our thought forms, how we feel about the tree, all of that enters into our perceptions, even with our eyes open. And this is especially true when it comes to using your psychic abilities to tune into that tree. So you've got a whole bunch of things going on when you are in the psychic realm. It's not even just dealing with, oh, can I tune into this as it is? You've already got these restrictions and challenges going with regular perception that enters into your psychic perception. And that's part of the training, is learning how to work with all that. And in the process, you really learn a lot about your own perception. But that being said, there's so much going on. And so for advanced students, a lot of times they reach a point where they want to start working professionally. They want to start working with different projects. Right now, there's a lot going on in the field of remote viewing in terms of working on even financial-based projects, and there's people that are looking for really good remote viewers. But what is a really good remote viewer? A really good remote viewer is not only somebody who can tune in and get some information in an accurate manner, because quite frankly, a lot of people can do that pretty quickly. Now we'll talk about some things that come up for newbies, because you'll find usually with brand new people, some people get a lot right away. Other people are getting a lot, but it's working through their filters again, through they're trying to come up with an understanding of what they're looking at, and that produces symbols, and the symbols can then get misinterpreted for what's physically there. So there'll be aspects of the symbols that are correct, but those symbols can be misleading. And there's some people whose natural thinking is more in terms of these symbols. And so for beginning students, they need to be broken of that habit. But then this is very different for those that are doing reading of people, where there's more abstract concepts. And so with abstract concepts, you need to use symbols. So again, there's one of the things that people sometimes do is try to extrapolate techniques and use them across the board with any subject. And while occasionally that can work, there's a different set of skills and tools, both for clairvoyant reading and for remote viewing. And then there's a different set of skills for what happens when you start a session and end a session, and when you start your practice and end your practice. And so let's now go back in order. Let's start with the beginning. And let's talk about what happens first in a session. In a session, you want to tune in. You need to make sure that you are dialed in to the right person or the right location or object or photo. And sometimes that's not a problem. Other times, depending on the circumstances, it's challenging. If you are reading someone who is present, but they bring along a couple of friends and their friends are sitting in the room, how do you know you're reading their friends, or how do you know that you're reading them? Well, there's techniques to that. So you have to tune in to them first, and then once you're tuned into your subject, you need to start an information flow. And so there's a whole set of techniques, a whole bunch of different ones for just getting that information flow started. But the way that our perception works is that we get information in very quick bursts, and they're tiny bursts, and then we have to oftentimes move our attention somewhere else to get another burst and then another burst. And so this enters into the area of probing to get further and further information, because again, a lot of people can get a single burst or two, but oftentimes that's not enough. For example, if someone has assigned me a target of my windmill across the yard that I'm looking at right now. Now, I wouldn't know it was a windmill in remote viewing, but let's say they said, okay, I have a target for you, and we'll just call it target number 1. I want you to tune into this. So there are a certain set of techniques that I'm going to use in order to make sure that I'm going to what they want me to go to, and then that I can get a flow of information. So I might see something round and I might see something tall, and both of those would be accurate, but that is not going to be enough if I need to do a good job to describe the windmill. Now, occasionally might be lucky, see a full-blown picture of a windmill. That would be terrific. However, a lot of times it's going to be aspects of what's there. So it could be something spinning and something round and something tall and something brown and something metal. So I've got all these impressions, but what do I do next? That's where probing comes in. You have to probe the round thing, the brown thing, the tall thing. And once you get some impressions, you need to probe those impressions. So over time, more and more information in the session comes up, and eventually you have more of a cohesive picture. So now, let's say now I'm in the middle of my session, and at this point too, someone who's probing at this level has probably had some initial practice and now is comfortable enough so that they can trust what they got on their paper or they got in their mind is correct, but they've got to keep getting more information about that. So we're now at the intermediate level, and now we want to go to the final stages where we put it together so we could send this off to someone who's going to look at it and be able to make sense of it and also find it easy to work with. So if I turn in 30 pages with a bunch of scribble that people could hardly read, even if I have a lot of really correct data there, if it's just too much all over the place and not organized well or not easy to read, the person I'm sending this to is going to have a hard time working with it. I might even have the word windmill in there somewhere. So by all people's definitions, I would have just done a great job using my psychic abilities to describe or to, name a windmill. But if that's in there, I mean, it's one thing if it just, my paper said windmill and you could read the word windmill and you saw a sketch of it. But a lot of remote viewers today, because of different techniques they've learned that are very useful, but sometimes they're turning in 20, 30 pages. I have done this myself. But there's data all over the place and it's scribbled and it's really hard to read. So people need to know how to summarize. They need how to know how to put their papers together in a neat fashion and send it off so that it's going to be workable for whoever's receiving it. Think of this. It's not any different than if you were in school and your teacher asked you to write a paper and you wrote the most beautiful, brilliant essay, but it was messy, everything was spelled wrong, you didn't have any punctuation, and your words were all over the place, all over the paper. Your teacher would be like, what the heck is this? I'm not even going to read it. Now, that is pretty much describing how I used to be. Not that my papers were that brilliant, but occasionally I thought, wow, I've presented some interesting arguments here and I was creative, and shouldn't that be good enough? Why does punctuation matter? Who cares? Well, it matters a lot, and I still continue to struggle with that. And I've learned these same lessons in remote viewing. So for advanced students, that's oftentimes what they need to learn how to do. How can they take all their information, put it together in a manner where it's really cohesive? And all of this takes time. So now I've just kind of broken down a session, the tuning in, probing. A lot of times it's not linear. You're going to go back and need to make sure you're tuning into the right thing again, maybe using different approaches as you go along and getting more and more information until you can put it all together and deliver it in a way that is useful. But what about development of the person overall? What does that look like? Well, oftentimes when I have new students, again, whether they're doing clairvoyant reading or they're doing remote viewing, initially things are awkward for them. They may have some great beginner's luck, you could say, or beginner's success with getting some bits of information that are very clear. But a lot of times that it's more, they really don't know what they're doing, and they are just learning to get comfortable visualizing, using their imagination, which is the vehicle through which the information flows. And so they don't know that everything is so brand new. They can't tell, is this my logical thoughts? Is this my imagination? Am I just visualizing this, or am I really tuning into something? and they don't know. And the fact of the matter is that's absolutely fine, because they're not going to know until they've done this enough. So there's ways to mitigate some of that, and then some of that has to be worked out through practice and supervised practice and through trial and error, and there seems to be a self-correcting process here. So that is, let's say they start tuning into something, and even a person, and at first they're just imagining things, and it's not really part of information they're picking up from the other person, but it's just their own projections. Well, if they continue with the session and continue to get more and more dialed in, the information, the correct information flowing from the person or whatever source they're tuning into will flow through those visualizations and start to correct them, so that what will emerge is more of a correct picture. Now, let me just say too, for anyone who is skeptical here, at least when I am teaching any kind of psychic work, we are not getting feedback during the work. So if we're reading someone, that person isn't speaking up. Oftentimes they're on the phone. We can't see them. We put them on mute. We don't want to get any visual cues, any impressions that are anything other than the intuitive based impressions. Same thing with remote viewing. Oftentimes with that, again, remote viewing locations, photographs, objects, we are working blind and are in not getting any kind of feedback until we're completely done. So people that are first learning have a lot to just get used to, and a lot of sorting out to do. And so the most important approach for a newbie is a person who is really having the attitude that they want to see this as a playground of discovery, that they want to really be patient and have fun and see how this is all going to unfold and how it's going to work, and letting go of any other expectations that this is going to be a very interesting experience. They can be absolutely guaranteed that. And this is such a better attitude than one where someone comes to the training with demands on themselves. And that can happen, especially if they're paying for training and they say, well, I don't want to waste my time and money, so I need to see progress immediately. And if I don't see progress immediately, I'm going to feel like I'm wasting my time. So those people, there's those, and then there's also sometimes people that are already operating at a professional level. I have a lot of students like that, whether they've been doing readings on psychic hotlines, which those are the people that have learned the absolute worst practices during their time on the hotline. Those that are really using their abilities or trying to use their abilities, they have some bad habits to break, so I'll help them with that as much as I can. The restrictions of the hotline sometimes doesn't allow for what a person really needs to be able to do, which is relax and have as much time as you need for the information to unfold. So there's that challenge for experienced people. And then also sometimes experienced or professional readers or psychics who come for additional training, they just have so much pressure on themselves. And so part of their learning, or I should say unlearning, would be to just arrive at the approach that they're just here to have fun and that it doesn't matter and everything is just going to unfold without having to conform to their expectations. And that's easier said than done. But those that can just come into this with that attitude, it's really a paradox, because with not a whole lot of time, but with some practice, they are going to start to see their skill level amping up and most of the time exceeding what they ever expected or even dreamed was possible that they could do. So their skill level will go up. And I say this is a paradox because ultimately the one of the many reasons I'm teaching this is to bring people to a level of proficiency, a level of independence, and a very high level of proficiency so they can go on and really make use of their intuitive abilities for their own self and also to help other people and to help the world on every level. Well, whether it's helping people to find their lost pets or to make discoveries on an archaeological level or to make scientific discoveries or anything like that. There's so many uses for our abilities because our abilities are another way that we get information about the world, about ourselves, about humanity, about other planets and what's happening there. So there's a lot we can do with these. And so proficiency, mastery, that is what we're going for. But this is why I say this has to be looked at being done in stages, because if just think of a 5-year-old that goes to kindergarten. Imagine if people had expectations of that kindergartner that they do at, let's say, the doctorate level. That kid would be crushed immediately. There'd be no way that they could meet those expectations. They would be stressed. They would get depressed. It's kind of similar to what happens when you first go into even a PhD level program, which I'm just now almost finishing up. When I went in 3 years ago, I had been out of graduate school for over 20 years and out of academia for that long, even though I had been doing research for a while and remote viewing. But I really there was so much I didn't know about philosophy and about different types of research methods, and there was so much I needed to learn, and yet both myself and some of my professors had these expectations that I should already know all this stuff and even know how to write a good paper, which I didn't know. I didn't know how to write a good academically acceptable paper when I first went into school 3 years ago. And so it was stressful. It made me want to leave. Fortunately, I didn't, because I learned a lot and now I know what's expected of me. But the point is that whenever someone is starting something new, even if you think they already should have or they already do have some skills, if it's a new approach, if it's a new methodology, if it's anything they haven't done before, and this is true for students, for employees, for anyone doing a skill, a new skill. If they haven't done that particular approach, there has got to be room for them to just start off and to fumble and stumble. There's one more analogy here. When I was younger, I used to ice skate, and then I was never a great ice skater. I would have trouble knowing the difference between my right and my left. I hate to admit, I still have difficulties with that. And I was just clumsy. So I stopped ice skating when I was in high school. And then in my, when I went back for my master's degree in social work at the University of Utah, I was living near a couple different really nice ice skating rinks and found they had an adult class for skaters. So I went back, I took a couple classes, and I was enjoying it, but I was just feeling like I wasn't progressing all that fast or very well. And one day I was just standing there watching other skaters, and I was watching a girl. She was probably about 13 or 14 or so, and she was doing all kinds of spins and jumps. They had her in some kind of harness, like on this rubber band type thing, and she was going up and down, but still she would fall a lot. She was maybe out of 10 spins, she would do one that was perfect, and then 5 of them she was just falling on her butt. And she'd just kind of laugh, or, sometimes she looked like she was getting a little hurt, but, nothing too bad. And as I was watching her, I had an epiphany, which was that I did not want to fall. I didn't want to fall even if they stuck me in one of those contraptions. I didn't want to fall even a little bit. I didn't want to fall several times. I just didn't want to land on the ice. And because of that, I realized I would never be a good ice skater. And I actually stopped at that point. I'll still go occasionally just to get some exercise, but I stopped really trying to progress because I knew if I wasn't willing to fall and have some bruises and look silly, look ridiculous sometimes, it wasn't going to work. And that is exactly what is needed with our psychic abilities. You have to be willing to be wrong. You have to be willing to say things that sound ridiculous and that make no sense. You have to be willing to say things that you're afraid might hurt other people's feelings. There are so many internal thoughts and ideas, and these are related to our ethics, to our fears, our social fears, and there are so many things that you encounter, and they're right there with you. They're the things in your mind. They're your thoughts and your feelings, and these are the things you're going to hit as soon as you start to go into an internal space and allow your visuals to come up or thoughts to come up working with your clairvoyance and remote viewing. And it's going to take everything you have to push past that. And there's a lot of people that don't push past that. But those that do, that's what separates the ones that keep with this. And then those that do find such tremendous personal growth and value in this practice. And then those that go on to continue to practice. And, this is not linear. So development, in some ways, yes, one stage builds on another. But just when you think you've gotten to a level of expertise and everything's going well, that's when you're given bigger challenges, right? That's when you are invited to do a session for someone who's in a life and death situation and is really counting on you to give them some input to help them make the right decisions. Or that is where you are approached by a TV show producer who is giving you a psychic challenge, or a researcher who says, oh, I heard you're doing really good work here. Will you be in my study? A lot is riding on this. I need you to do a good job. So at that point, with those kinds of pressure, and also where you may be given a completely different kind of target or a completely different kind of person, or find yourself in a brand new situation, this is where you are going to resort back to some of your initial fears and concerns and getting stuck on things that you thought that you got past to begin with. So what would I say about all of this in conclusion? Well, I would say that one of the most important things with psychic work is giving yourself a break, letting yourself know that you have time. There should be no reason why you have to progress immediately and really fast. Now, I'm not saying progression takes that much time, but it does take weeks, months, and years to get to a certain point. And if you can let everything unfold in your own development, and a lot of this is practice. And just a side note here, in the practice, while yes, sometimes getting training, that's going to cost money, just like you go to college, that could cost you what, $100,000, $200,000. You take a psychic development class, that could cost you anywhere from a few $100s for an audio course to some people charge $4,000 for the course. Now, if you're going to pay that much money, you want to make sure that you're going to be getting a lot of personal attention and that there's going to be a lot of supervised practice built in. And but it doesn't have to be that expensive, and you can learn, if you are motivated, you can learn without paying anything, because you could go to the library, you could get my books, You Are a Psychic, The Art of Clairvoyant Reading and Healing, Extraordinary Psychic, Proven Techniques to Master Your Natural Psychic Abilities. There are so many different remote viewing books, so many different intuitive development books, and a lot of these are quite good. So, and there are lots of different social media forums and groups out there. There are people that get together for free to practice. I have a free site called seventhsight.org where people can get together, practice with each other. So you can do this for free. It does help to have instruction. That is why I started the International School of Clairvoyance and why I teach classes. So it does help to get some instruction, and so some of that will cost some money. That being said, beyond that, what's most important is practice, and there are endless opportunities for practice if you don't have people or things to practice in your own life. There are practice targets online on my site, ISC-Learn. There are remote viewing practice targets, and again, you get involved in different social media groups. There's going to be endless free opportunities. There's also organizations like the International Remote Viewing Association or the Applied Precognition Project. These are for remote viewers, and these have a lot of free opportunities too. So it's not that you're going to have to pay anywhere close to what you would pay even for a few college classes. This is something where if you're totally broke, you don't have to wait. You can start reading books, you can watch videos, you can join social media groups. And if you do have the money and you do have the time, I highly recommend getting yourself into a class. But again, it's going to take time. You're going to need to practice. And if you want to continue with this work and really get your skills up to the professional level, the difference between where you are now and where you are at that point is going to be about practice with a little bit of guidance along the way. So with that, I would like to thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Other Side of the Curve, sponsored by the International School of Clairvoyance. I am Debra Lynne Katz, and if you have any questions at all about these subject matters, do feel free to write to me at Debra Katz, DebraKatz @yahoo.com. You can also find my website at debrakatz.com, and I tend to start new semesters 4 times a year of the clairvoyant classes and remote viewing classes. And I also hope to see you at perhaps an upcoming conference with the International Remote Viewing Association is one I always like to go to. The Applied Precognition Project conferences I always enjoy. The Parapsychology Association conferences can teach you a lot if you are interested in research, more scientific, academic, and of exploring psychic phenomenon and abilities. And there's so much more out there. So with that, have a great rest of your day, and I will hopefully connect with you at another time. Bye.